Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely audacious true story of Pascal Paillet. We're looking at a guy who waged a decade-long escalating war against the French penal system and in the process literally transformed the landscape of maximum security across Europe.
Okay, so let's jump right into this. Think about this for a second. How does one single guy manage to break out of the highest security facilities in an entire country? We're not talking about painstakingly digging a tunnel for 20 years like in the movies, or, I don't know, slipping out in a laundry cart. We're talking about outsmarting the entire national security apparatus of France.
Well, the answer is as simple as it is completely unbelievable. You use a hijacked helicopter. And get this, you don't just do it once. You pull off this exact, highly coordinated stunt 3 consecutive times. It honestly sounds like a Hollywood script, but every single detail we're about to cover, 100% true. Part 1, the making of a criminal. Let's take a look at Paillet's origins. To really grasp this escalating game of cat and mouse, we have to go back to his roots in the impoverished neighborhoods of Marseille. Picture young Pascal. He's spending his days watching all these wealthy merchants and tourists at the port, just flashing luxury cars and expensive watches. Now contrast that with his life at home. His mother is living in poverty, working herself to the bone as a seamstress. Her hands would literally bleed from the labor, and she'd even skip her own critical medical treatments just to save enough money to feed him. It's heartbreaking, right? And this deep resentment is exactly what pushed him into a local gang, starting out with just petty pickpocketing. Part 2, the train heist escalation. This is where a massive line gets crossed. Tragically, his mother passes away from kidney failure. And at this point, Paillet feels like he has absolutely nothing left to lose. His crimes rapidly escalate, from petty port theft into heavily armed, highly organized violence with his gang. So they decide to target a Bank of France train. Using the cover of heavy fog and pouring rain, they set up at both ends of the train and just open fire to confuse the guards. They actually derail the train and extract millions of francs. But this operation crossed a huge line because it tragically resulted in the death of the train driver. For a few years, these guys lived like ghosts, but they were finally caught hiding out at a rural farm. Why? Because one of the gang members actually went and bought a luxury sports car in pure cash. Unbelievable, right? So standing before the judge, Paillet doesn't apologize. Instead, he delivers this chilling speech. He calls out the total hypocrisy of a system that completely ignored his missing father and his impoverished mother, but then mobilized an entire nation when a bank's money went missing. He ended up getting a 15-year sentence. Part 3, the first chopper escape. The year is 2001. Now, Paillet had zero intention of serving that time. His remaining gang members, the guys who didn't get caught, actually visited him in prison using these wild, elaborate disguises. We're talking fake teeth, theatrical makeup, the whole shebang, posing as his elderly aunt and her family. And here's the craziest part. Right in front of the listening guards, they encrypted their entire extraction plan. They'd ask about his health, which was actually code for the guard's patrol status. They asked if it was cold on the roof, meaning the helicopter landing zone. And then they reminded him to take his medicine at 5, which locked in a 5 a.m. start time. Just brilliant tactical planning. When the morning of the escape finally arrived, they used nature as their ultimate cover. It's a pitch-black night, pouring rain, a massive thunderstorm is rolling in. Suddenly, a power outage plunges the whole prison into total darkness. Sirens are blaring everywhere, creating just absolute chaos. Out of nowhere, a hijacked helicopter hovers low over the yard. Amidst a hail of gunfire from these panicked guards, Paillet leaps for a rope dropped from the chopper and just vanishes into the storm. Part 4, beating the iron net. Recaptured in Spain. So, France is deeply embarrassed. They eventually recapture him in Spain, where he'd been living a life of constant disguise, and they throw him into a highly classified prison. And to make absolutely sure this never happens again, they install these massive anti-helicopter iron nets across the entire airspace of the prison yards. Problem solved, right? Well, Paillet just adjusts his strategy. His accomplices hijack a second helicopter, but this time they don't land. They hover right over the yard, rappel down like an elite special ops team, and literally cut through those brand new iron nets with heavy tools in broad daylight. They pull Paillet up mid-air and fly away under heavy fire. Absolutely wild. Part 5, the Bastille Day breakout. Fast forward to July 14th, 2007.
Eventually, the law catches up with him again. He's captured at a cabin in Vaucluse with over 100,000 euros in cash, and France places him under DPS status. Basically, that means he's constantly getting moved between different prisons in extreme isolation, so he can never, ever learn the layout or the routines. But look, Paillet is a master of timing. He targets July 14th, Bastille Day, the French national holiday. While the entire country is distracted by fireworks, parades, and massive celebrations, the prison is super quiet and completely understaffed with guards on leave. And while everyone's watching the parades, Paillet's gang is holding a pilot at gunpoint at a nearby airfield. 5. That is the number of minutes this entire operation took. Just 5 minutes. The helicopter lands directly on the roof of Grasse Prison. Heavily armed, masked men break open his cell door, pull him out, and fly away into the mountains. 5 minutes, not a single shot fired, and he humiliates the French authorities for a third time.
Part 6. The End of the Line. A Europe-wide manhunt.
The sheer absurdity of one single man outsmarting an entire nation's security apparatus 3 times. It sparked massive international outrage. The French public and media were just mercilessly mocking the security forces. This led to a huge Europe-wide Interpol manhunt, with immediate arrest warrants across the continent. I mean, look at this timeline: 2001, 2003, and 2007. He proved that no matter how high the walls or how strong the nets, a helicopter was literally the skeleton key to the French penal system. But a run like that just couldn't last forever. Paillet is eventually captured in Montereau, Spain. He'd been living completely nocturnally, paying for literally everything in cash to avoid detection. He's sent back to France and sentenced to life in prison. But his legacy, it's permanent. France had to entirely overhaul its prison architecture and airspace laws just because of him. And today, his exact location remains a highly classified state secret. So, as we wrap up this explainer, it really leaves us with a fascinating question about the ultimate cost of his actions. Sure, he achieved legendary status and pulled off the impossible 3 separate times. But did his tactical genius actually buy his freedom, or did it just guarantee that he'd spend the rest of his life buried in a fortress built entirely because of him? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey.